This episode is brought to you by Google Gemini. With the Gemini app, you can talk live and have a real-time conversation with an AI assistant. It's great for all kinds of things, like if you want to practice for an upcoming interview, ask for advice on things to do in a new city, or brainstorm creative ideas. And by the way, this script was actually read by Gemini. Download the Gemini app for iOS and Android today. Must be 18 plus to use Gemini Live.
The sounds of the season can often sound like this.
So, when are we getting some grandkids?
But with Hilton's Season to Stay sale, they could sound a bit more like this. Or this. Stay and save up to 20% off when you book before January 5th at Hilton.com. Hilton, for the stay. Minimum 2-night stay required. Excludes luxury and all-inclusive properties. Terms and conditions apply.
In the waiting season, there's still so much fun to be had. And sometimes it's more of like a type 2 fun. You know, it's fun in retrospect. You're looking back and the memory is probably a little bit easier than the moment was itself. The waiting season gets a bad rep, but it's really not all that bad. I believe that God's waiting room is an opportunity to train, and God's waiting room is an opportunity to grow stronger in your faith. And so I like to call that God's wait room. Hey guys, what's up? Welcome to or back to the show. Thank you so much for clicking on today's episode. My name is Lily. I'm your host. And wow, we made it through another year. Merry Christmas, by the way. I guess we should kick it off with that. Merry Christmas. Christmas was yesterday. If you guys are listening today on the 26th, Thursday, I hope that everyone had a Merry Christmas. I sincerely hope that you had a really great holiday and that you got to spend time with the people that you love. And if that was not the case for you, I pray that you get that opportunity to do so soon. I know I have a lot of friends spread far and wide, and so my heart goes out to you if you're one of them, and you don't get to spend today with your family. I'm thinking about you, and I love you very much. And yeah, I don't know why, but this year specifically, I'm like having a hard time when I think about all the people that don't get to spend Christmas with their family, and it just makes me really sad. So anyway, just know that my heart goes out to you if you're in that boat this year. But either way, I hope that you guys are doing well. Thank you so much for clicking on today's episode. Sorry to kick it off kind of sappy like that, but that's just kind of how my brain works. This episode kind of feels like a term paper. As I was writing the outline, I realized that it's kind of like I was going to say compilation and culmination of everything that we've kind of talked about on the pod this year, like everything that that I know that I've gone through. And most of the time you guys are kind of right there with me. And so this episode kind of feels a little bit like a term paper, which is kind of exciting. It is called Faith in the Waiting Season. God's waiting room is actually his wait room. So we're going to get into that concept today. But before we do that, I did want to let you guys know that next week, the 2nd of January, which is crazy that it's already 2025. Next week, we're taking a little break. So we're just going to take 1 week off. I am currently recording this on the 22nd. So I'm taking the week of Christmas and New Year's off just to spend time with family and just to kind of hit the reset button before we hit the ground running on January 9th. I have a huge announcement, and I'm really, really excited about it. So January 9th, mark your calendar, is when 80/20 will be back for the 2025 season. And it's going to be pretty cool, this thing that I had to tell you. And I need to just zip it because I'm almost going to spill the beans, but it's going to be well worth the wait. And I've been working very, very hard with the crew behind the scenes to generate some really amazing stuff for you in the new year. So stay on the lookout, be on the lookout. January 9th, mark your calendar. It's going to be a big one. All that to say, on the 2nd, we're taking a break. So if you still want a little bit of 80/20 in your life, you can go back and listen to your favorite episodes again, or you could check out my episode that I recorded with my friend Callie on her podcast, Healthy But Human. She's amazing. She was on this podcast last week, and then we posted an episode with each other on the other one's podcast last week. I don't know if that made any sense, but we swapped podcasts. That's what's called, a podcast swap, a pod swap for short. we pod swapped and we went on each other's podcasts, and both of those episodes went up respectively on their channels last week. So she was on 80/20 and then I was on Healthy But Human, and I just listened to that episode. It turned out really, really well, and I just had such a great conversation with Callie. I feel like sometimes when I'm interviewed, I talk about things that I wouldn't talk about on our, not that I wouldn't talk about them, but they're just not prompted. And so sometimes I feel like when I interview on other people's podcasts, it's almost like a better episode. And I was thinking about texting Callie being like, hey, can I post your episode on my feed? And she probably would say yes, but I want you guys to go listen on Callie's podcast. So next Thursday, the 2nd, if you want a little bit of 80/20, or if you want to hear from me, go listen to that episode on Healthy But Human. I'll have a link to the show notes, and that would be super cool. And then we'll be back on the 9th with a super exciting announcement. On that episode with Callie, I had a concept in mind that I was kind of toying with, and I feel like this concept is weighing kind of heavy on my heart right now, and I wanted to do a more dedicated episode all about it. And the concept is how God's waiting room is actually his training room, or his weight room, as I like to say. So we're going to dive into that idea today, and I talk a little bit about it on Callie's podcast. So if you're listening to this and then you go back and listen, you might kind of hear a general idea, but this episode will definitely be more in depth as far as that idea goes. So across the board, everyone who I talk to kind of agrees that this year has been a building year. Maybe you might call it a waiting year, a waiting season, a period of what am I supposed to do next? I feel like I'm throwing stuff at the wall and nothing's sticking, or I feel like there's a buildup, but nothing's really coming of it. And I feel like for me this year, I just kind of hit like dead end after dead end after dead end. If you have ridden the roller coaster of this past year with me, you definitely have heard me say that this year's been a building year. And first off, I just want to say thank you for sticking around. If you're new to the show, welcome to the family. I am so happy that you didn't have to stick around for the roller coaster of the year that it's been. I know that there's definitely a newer audience here, and I'm so grateful for you, and I'm so happy that you're here. So thanks for showing up. And now you get to ride like the next roller coaster, whatever that looks like for me. I feel like we're always on a roller coaster. Life, what's that quote? I was going to say life's a climb. There's two quotes that I like to mix together, and it's life's a climb, but the view is great. And life's a journey, but getting there is half the fun, or something like that. And so I always like to say life's a climb, but getting there is half the fun. And that's kind of the whole thing, right? It's just figuring out life, making it happen, doing the thing, and how getting there is truly half the fun. And I look back over this past year, and as much as it's tested me, it's been a lot of fun. And so I can't just sit here and be like, oh, it was, a waiting season, blah, blah, blah. Like in the waiting season, there's still so much fun to be had. And sometimes it's more of like a type 2 fun, like, it's fun in retrospect. You're looking back and the memory is probably a little bit easier than the moment was itself. But I think a lot of times, like, the waiting season gets a bad rep, but it's really not all that bad. All that to say, firsthand, I know how difficult it can be to keep the faith and keep a sense of confidence in the plan that the Lord has for you, and just kind of find peace in the waiting period, in the waiting room, in the waiting season, because it feels like it's never going to end. Like there have been things that I felt God saying, just wait, for years. Like there was one very specific moment, I think I've talked about on the podcast before, but I was sitting at a stoplight. It was like probably 2 years ago now. And I was praying about something and thinking about something. And I just heard God say, just wait, like just be patient. And that thing is so far out of reach. And I don't think it ever will be. I hope that I get something better. And there can be different variations of waiting seasons, right? Sometimes a waiting season is a week. Sometimes a waiting season is a day. Sometimes a waiting season is 5 years. Sometimes it's 10 years. Sometimes it's a lifetime. Sometimes you're never going to get the thing that God has maybe placed on your heart. And that can be a really tough pill to swallow, but it's what you do in that waiting period. It's the faith that you build in that waiting period that will later become the foundation when you do get that thing, when you do get that job, when you do get that husband, when you do get into that school, when you do insert big dream, small dream, daily task right here. And a lot of times I think, yes, the waiting season gets a bad reputation, but the waiting season also means that you're gearing up for something really great. And sometimes it's almost like the longer the wait, the better the thing is. We could use singleness as an example, right? Like the longer I wait for the guy that I'm supposed to be with, the better I hope he is. Like I was just having coffee with a friend this morning. We were talking about boys and I was telling her, like, I believe that the guy that I'm supposed to be with, like he's still in the works. Like he's got work to do. He's got personal development to do. And I laugh saying that because I have so much work to do, I think, before I get into a relationship, like just baggage that I need to work through and personal problems and all this stuff. And I'm laughing because it's funny to me. But I know that whatever guy is out there for me, like he has work to do. And I believe that. And I know that we'll meet at the perfect time because God's timing is always perfect. But I know that like the longer I wait, right, to get into a relationship, because I hope that like the next relationship or next couple relationships, like whatever, I hope that I don't have that many more. I hope that like I find a guy soon and like that's that. But, the longer that I wait, the more I hope that he's growing closer to the Lord, the more I hope that he is developing personally, the more I hope that he's reaching his goals, the things that he might think he wants to accomplish before he gets into a relationship. And same goes for me. Like, I hope that I grow closer to the Lord. I hope that I become a better person. I hope that I hit certain goals, whether that is in school or financially or career-wise. Like, I hope that I hit certain marks that in my head makes sense to hit before I get into something serious. So anyway, all that to say, I really believe that the waiting period can be a great lead up if you make it so. I believe that God's waiting room is an opportunity to train, and God's waiting room is an opportunity to grow stronger in your faith. And so I like to call that God's weight room because I love fitness. You guys know that I love the gym. And so it just makes sense that God's training room would be a weight room. Real quick, I want to get into where this idea came from. So I was reading my Bible. I have the Flourish Bible for women, and I was reading the book of Luke. And Luke 2 is the birth of Jesus. And if you guys want, this is like a perfect way to kick off this episode because Christmas was yesterday. And Luke 2 talks about the birth of Jesus. If you've never heard the story of the birth of Jesus, I will leave a link in the show notes. There's some amazing sermons out there that will kind of dive deeper into the birth of Jesus and how all of that happened. But today I really want to focus on the idea that the people of Israel had waited centuries for the Messiah to come. They had waited centuries for Jesus to be born. And in my Bible, as I was reading Luke 2, sometimes my Bible will have like little bonus stories off to the side. And so there was a piece of bonus content attached to Luke 2. And it says this: God is always on time. The people of Israel had eagerly awaited centuries for the Messiah to arrive, but it wasn't until the perfect moment in history, during the census of the entire Roman world, when the baby was born. Jesus was born at the right time in the right place, fulfilling many Old Testament prophecies. You might be waiting for God to fulfill a promise for you, but don't lose hope. He's always on time. And then this is the last sentence that I love. And it says, however, sometimes God's waiting room can often be his training room. And waiting helps you to grow into the woman that he intends you to be. And I read that and I was like, mind blown. Ding, 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 like bells went off. God's waiting room is actually his weight room. God's waiting room is his weight room. Meaning that when you get into the weight room as a fitness girly, when you walk into the gym, you probably have a goal in mind. You probably have a workout plan that you're following. If you don't, that's totally cool. But oftentimes you're like, okay, I'm going to go to the gym because I want to get stronger. Easy goal, easy example to run with here. I want to go to the gym because I want to get stronger. So you know that maybe every couple weeks you're going to start picking up heavier dumbbells. You're going to start loading extra plates, more plates, heavier plates onto your barbell. Maybe you have to up your calorie intake a little bit because you want to be able to lift heavier. Maybe on the flip side, you need to lower your calorie intake because you're cutting. Like whatever the situation might be, you probably have a goal in mind and you probably have a template or a workout routine or something to help you get closer to your goal of getting stronger. And the same thing goes in the faith. The same thing goes in your relationship with God. When you're in the waiting room, are you just sitting around being complacent, waiting for God to just like drop an opportunity in your lap? Sometimes he does it. Sometimes he does it. But oftentimes this waiting season is an opportunity for you to actively grow stronger in your faith instead of just sitting and waiting for something to happen. You probably don't become a better runner by sitting on the couch. You become a faster runner by going for runs. You become an Olympic athlete by training like an Olympian. Like, it just makes so much sense. And so I'll take this personally, like, why would I sit on the couch waiting for my faith to get stronger if I'm not actively chasing after God? And I don't want to speak on your behalf, so I'll take that one personally. But just give that a little bit of thought. Like, seriously, take a second, look at your habits, look at your routines. Are you just waiting for God to drop something in your lap, or are you actively growing stronger in your faith? What are you doing in the weight room?
The sounds of the season can often sound like this.
So, when are we getting some grandkids?
But with Hilton's season to stay sale, they could sound a bit more like this. Or this. Stay and save up to 20% off when you book before January 5th at Hilton.com. Hilton, for the stay. Minimum 2-night stay required. Excludes luxury and all-inclusive properties. Terms and conditions apply.
So good, so good, so good.
Get ready, because Clear the Rack is on at your Nordstrom Rack store. Now through Thursday, find incredible deals on Wear Now styles on sale for even less at Nordstrom Rack. Take an extra 25% off red tag clearance throughout the store from brands like UGG, Vince, Stuart Weitzman, AG, and more. All sales final. The best stuff goes fast. So shop this sale at Nordstrom Rack today. Please see NordstromRack.com or ask a store associate for details.
You're in the waiting room. You just scanned your card. They welcomed you into the gym. Now, what are you going to do? How do you train effectively? That's what I want to spend the back half of this podcast episode talking about, is how to train effectively, training for godliness. A couple months ago, my sister and I started a Bible study / run club called Soul Run Club. And our mission is to bring people to Christ through spiritual and physical fitness. We kind of elaborated on that mission statement with a verse from 1 Timothy 4:8. For physical training has some value, but training for godliness has value for all things, holding promise for both the present life and life to come. And so whether it's hitting the gym or you're lacing up your shoes for a mile, whatever the situation, it's no secret that you must be committed to your physical fitness. But imagine what would happen if you use that same dedication, that same formula to train your spiritual fitness as well. And so as we kind of talk through these 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 points, actually 6 points, I would love for you to just kind of like shift the perspective of like, okay, I'm training for spiritual fitness. This isn't just about looking a certain way. This isn't just about getting a faster run time. This is about eternity. Like, a lot is on the line here. So what does God's weight room actually look like? Well, I think first and foremost, it's important to know that He might prune you. If you have plants in your house, you probably do this. When I water my plants, I pick off the dead leaves. I remove parts of the plant to make sure that it continues to be healthy and grow healthier. It's like a selective removal of the plant parts in order to benefit the plant overall. And God does the same thing. There's a verse in John 15, and Jesus is talking about being the vine and the branches. And He says, I am the true vine. My Father is the gardener. He cuts off every branch in me that bears no fruit, while every branch that does bear fruit, He prunes, so that it will be even more fruitful. And I love that. Like, have you ever, ladies, I think that we've all done this. You start talking to a boy and you're texting him and you're going on dates, and then all of a sudden you're like, God, if this man is not from you, then take him away. And then suddenly the guy just breaks up with you, or suddenly he just doesn't text you back. And you're like, okay, well, you know what? I asked God. I said, God, if he's not from you, if this isn't part of your plan for me, then take him away. And He does so fast. It's kind of humbling, and it's honestly a great strategy if you're ever unsure if you should continue to pursue a relationship. Quick prayer: God, if this isn't from you, help me let him go, most of the time it happens pretty quick. And that's just one example of God pruning you when it comes to your relationships. And he can do this in every area of your life. I think oftentimes God will take things away in order to help you grow and help you grow healthier. And also so he can steer you in a certain direction. I thought of this concept the other day and I'm kind of still toying with it, but I think sometimes this might have a negative connotation, but I think that it's a good thing. Sometimes God will kind of pigeonhole you to make a certain decision. And in my life, I have a lot of things happening around me that have kind of encouraged me to make a certain decision. I feel like sometimes God will just give you things on like a need to know basis. And so it's like one thing will happen. And you're like, I feel like I should start thinking about that certain decision. And then another thing would happen. And you're like, I think I should start maybe looking further into that certain decision. And then a third thing will happen. You'll be like, that decision starts to sound better. And then a fourth thing will happen. And you're like, okay, that decision's starting to sound really good. And then a fifth thing will happen. You're like, yep, I'm doing it. And so sometimes like things will just start to happen around you where God is kind of like leading you in a certain direction. And then sometimes it's like so evidently apparent that you feel like you're almost pigeonholed. And I know that like pigeonholing has like a bad connotation, but I think sometimes it's a good thing. Like God is just so, he's protecting you in a way. And so he's like encouraging you to make that certain decision. I hope that this makes sense. I don't know. Anyway, long story short, I think God will prune you to help steer you in a certain direction. He'll take things away. He'll cut some stuff out. He'll help you to focus your energy on what matters most. The closer you grow to him, the easier it will be to understand the way that he loves you, his expectations for you, and how to hear his voice. And that's the next one, is God will train you to hear his voice. I think at some point in your walk, he might suggest to you something that you don't want to do. Some point in your walk with the Lord, he will suggest something that you have no interest in doing. It might happen on a daily basis. It might happen on a monthly basis. It might happen on a yearly basis. But at some point, and it will continue to happen, at some point, God will suggest that you do something that you are like, whoa, that seems like something that I'm not interested in doing. But in order to know if that suggestion came from him, you gotta know what his voice sounds like. And so I think before God will ask you to make a big decision, like ending a relationship, like moving to a new city that you don't really want to go to, maybe quitting the job that you worked so hard for, maybe taking the job that you don't really want to take. Like, I think before he asks you to do any of these really big, hard things, he's going to train you to listen for the small things. God's voice is a still, small whisper. He's never going to yell at you. Sometimes it's blatantly obvious and sometimes it's just not. But I think the more that you kind of start to tune in and ask God, hey, speak to me and help me to hear your voice. And you can ask him, hey, like pray, make it blatantly obvious that it's you. And he totally will. And maybe just start with the small things. Hey, God, make it blatantly obvious of how I can serve the people that I come in contact with today. Maybe you're in the drive-thru at Starbucks and God's like, hey, pay for the person behind you. You have no idea what they're going through. You don't know the impact that might make on their day, or maybe it won't impact them at all. Maybe it's listening to God when you're in the middle of a conversation and all of a sudden you start to hear the Holy Spirit say like, hey, maybe you shouldn't share that information. Maybe you should be a little bit more discerning when you're talking with this person about that specific subject. And then you start to just kind of like shift the conversation into something else, something a little bit different, because you hear God's voice saying, hey, slow down. Maybe we don't want to share that information with this person. Little things like that are building blocks to help you with your decision-making skills and understanding the way that God speaks, in turn helping you to make those big decisions when it comes to moving, getting a new job, starting a new relationship, ending a relationship, getting engaged, getting married, having kids. I don't know, whatever the big decisions in life might be, listening for God's voice on a day-to-day basis will help you in the long term. And I think that starts in the training room, because oftentimes when we're just like waiting, when we think about the waiting season, we're waiting for something big. We're waiting for that big, wow, defining moment, whatever it is. We're waiting for the big thing, but we got to train to listen for the small things too. All right, third bullet point. I think God will train you to turn to him for joy, peace, and comfort, and not the ways of the world. This is probably the biggest thing that I struggle with in the waiting room, is turning to God for peace, joy, and comfort, not the ways of the world. You know how many times I don't go to bed until like midnight because I've been scrolling on Instagram, just laughing at Instagram reels, trying to get that dopamine. That's like one of my biggest things is Instagram reels. If y'all listen, you know that. And while I'm scrolling, I always hear this little voice like, Lil, put your phone down, pick up your Bible. I'm like, okay, fine. So I do it. And then I always feel so much better because I'm reading the word of God and not scrolling on Instagram. And I get into, like, when I do scroll, I always get to like the dark side of reels where it's like, talking about politics and the, the world and all this drama and the drones and all this stuff. And I'm like, goodness gracious, like the world is, falling apart. And then I just hear God saying like, no one will know the day or the hour. Why don't you just pick up your Bible? Let's talk about it. Stop scrolling reels. That's exactly what I heard last night. I'm like, copy that. I'm on it. And so I just put my phone down. And I originally opened the Instagram app to giggle and to laugh and to see what my friends were up to. Turning to my phone for joy, peace, and comfort never really works out. So whatever your thing is, maybe it's a guy that you call up when you're lonely for joy, peace, and comfort. That's fleeting. Maybe you like to go out. Maybe you like to party. Maybe you overeat. Maybe you undereat. Maybe you are turning to even good things in this world, even like working out, for example. Like, are you working out as a distraction? Are you over exercising? Like, there are so many things that can be in our lives that are masked as good things that can become distractions that we're using to get joy, peace, and comfort from that aren't actually helping us grow closer to God. John 15:9 says, "As for the Father loved me, so I have loved you. Now remain in my love. If you keep my commands, you will remain in my love, just as I have kept my Father's commands and remained in his love. I've told you this so that my joy may be in you and your joy can be complete." So that's something that Jesus was saying. And those words were spoken by Jesus. And he's essentially saying that if you remain in my love, if you remain close to me, your joy may be complete. The joy that we get from the phone or the joy that we get from the guy that we're just texting on an occasional evening, or the joy that we get from partying or going out or whatever your kind of like vice is, like whatever joy you're getting is so fleeting. And I don't really think that that is joy. It's kind of masked as joy. It's like a joy imposter, like it's not actual joy from God because it's so fleeting. And so remaining in God's love in the waiting room, in the training room, will strengthen your faith and will teach you to run to him first as the source of joy, not the phone, not the boy, not the whoever. All right, next up, you have to talk to God. You got to talk to God in the training room. You got to pray without ceasing. Even out of the training room, you got to pray without ceasing. But especially in the waiting room, if you're waiting on something, my best piece of advice is to surrender that thing and lay it at his feet, even if you have to do that every single day. Good morning, Lord. Thank you for another day. I'm laying this thing at your feet again because I just can't, because it's so hard for me to give up. So I'm going to give it to you again and again and again and again until I can completely surrender it to you. So practicing that surrender in your prayer is so important. 1 Thessalonians 5:16-18 says, "Rejoice always, pray without ceasing, give thanks in all circumstances, for this is the will of God in Jesus Christ for you." In this passage specifically, Paul is writing to encourage Christians who were facing persecution. And Paul's essentially saying, rejoice always, like be happy in every circumstance, and pray without ceasing. Like, do not give up, do not stop praying. Do not stop that open line of communication with God. And in the end of this letter, Paul actually has a couple reminders titled Final Directions to the church, which include directions like being patient, holding each other in a high regard, striving to do what's good. And through all of that, the one thing that just jumps off the page at me is pray without ceasing. I think oftentimes when you surrender the outcome, when you leave the outcome up to God, it takes the burden, the weight of that thing off your chest. Because sometimes our dreams can feel like burdens. Sometimes the goals that we think that we have for this life can feel exhausting. .
This episode is brought to you by AWS. Amazon Q Business is the new generative AI assistant from AWS. Many tasks can make business slow, like wading through mud.
Help!
Luckily, there's a faster, easier, less messy choice. Amazon Q can securely understand your business data to help you streamline tasks, like summarizing quarterly results or doing complex analyses in no time. Q got this. Learn what Amazon Q Business can do for you at aws.com/learn more.
This podcast is a perfect example. I wanted to throw in the towel. It was very much on the chopping block back in the summertime. And the dream felt like a burden. And that's just me being transparent. And it doesn't feel that way anymore because I've just prayed so heavily about it and I've surrendered it at God's feet. And that's something that I, kind of thought that I was doing, but I really wasn't doing it. And eventually it just kind of clicks. And I think that you can only connect the dots looking back of like, okay, well, in that moment a couple months ago, I definitely hadn't surrendered it, but now I have, and things are different. And you just can feel the difference because you have peace, you have faith, you know that God's got it. Pray without ceasing. Surrender that thing. And last but not least, this is my last point to make here about the waiting room. What's going to happen in the wait room is that he will ask you to wait patiently and wait with consistency. I've never seen someone make progress in their training without being consistent. Your running times aren't going to get faster if you only go run like once a week. The more that you train, the more that you do something, the more consistent you are, the better you're going to get at it. And so the more that you wait patiently, consistently, the easier it's going to be to spend time in the waiting room and the more fun it's going to be. This is probably the most difficult thing that I've learned this year, is that not only do I need to train actively, but I need to be consistent. And the daily act of surrender, the thing that's been boldly placed on my heart, has been the hardest thing for me. But just continuing to have faith that God's timing will always be better than my timing is something that's constantly being tested, but constantly being proven true. And Romans 8:28, it's one of my favorite verses, is God is always working out all things for our good. And that's such a critical reminder of how God is always working things out. Like he wants you to have fun. He wants your dreams to come true. Like why would he place something on your heart that you weren't made to do? There's a saying that God will not call the qualified, he qualifies the called. And I'm not exactly sure like what verse that is entangled with, but I think that, and that's more of a Pinterest quote than a Bible verse, but I've seen it come true in almost every single Bible story, is that most of the time the people that are called to do something, they don't feel well equipped. And so whatever dream is placed on your heart, whatever thing you think you might be waiting for, know that you don't necessarily have to be qualified for it, because God will put you exactly in the right places at the right time, exactly where you need to be in order to get closer to that thing, to start taking those steps, to start learning the right things to say and the right moves to make, and helping you to weave your web of connections and the networking and the people that you are going to have to call upon to help you make this dream come true. Like he will put all of those things in place. It might take longer than you think it's going to. It might not look exactly the same way that you think it's going to, but it's going to happen. It's going to happen his way, and it's going to happen way better than the way that you thought you wanted it to go. The 5 things that will happen in the training room. God will prune you. He will train you to hear his voice. He will train you to turn to him for peace, joy, and comfort. You got to talk to him. You got to pray without ceasing. And he will ask you to wait patiently with consistency. Going into 2025, I am not making a vision board this year. I'm not really setting goals. And I know that's controversial. She's not setting goals. She's like the goal girly. Yeah, last year, maybe it's 2023, I don't know, I did a vision board workshop. I was like real big on setting goals, and I'm not setting goals for 2 reasons. The first one being, the other day I wrote in my journal something along the lines of, I'm afraid to set goals for 2025 because I don't want to set expectations that I cannot meet. That is a very sad thing to write, first off. And second off, that's a very legitimate thing to write. That's a very real fear, that I will set expectations for myself that I cannot meet, and I will only let myself down. And as I reflect on my vision board from this past year, yes, there are things that happened. I had a beautiful year, but a lot of those goals, I couldn't even touch them with a 10-foot pole. And for those reasons, I feel discouraged. On the flip side of that, I think something that my vision board missed was leaving room for the friendships I didn't dream that I would make, leave room for the areas that I made progress in that I never thought I would actually ever make progress in. So I didn't even try to put them on my vision board. My true vision for 2025 is going to be to surrender more and dream less, and kind of be okay with taking out the predictability of the year. And in the most literal sense, let go and let God. It's kind of freeing, releasing the expectations. And I'm not saying don't set goals, and I'm not saying don't go after the things that you want to happen, because it's so healthy to want things and to go after the dreams that God has placed on your heart. I'm not saying don't go for those things. I'm just saying to hold your dreams with an open palm, knowing that sometimes God has something better in store for you. I don't know who said this, but I heard it once. Everything that I've let go of has claw marks on it. And I would hope for you that you can loosen the grip. God has a better idea for your life, something better than you could have ever imagined. And when you're holding on to those dreams that you think you want so tightly, not only are you missing out on the cool things that He has for you, you're missing out. You are missing out. Like, eventually, you might have to mourn some dreams, but eventually you're going to become okay with the place that He's sending you to, the job that you didn't think you wanted to take. You're going to be okay with taking the path, the road less traveled, because it led you to exactly the place where you were supposed to be. Maybe the job that you don't want to take is going to lead you to this city where you don't want to be. You're going to meet the guy that you didn't think that you needed because you currently have a boyfriend. Like, you don't know how God is going to work in your life. And you just have to hold it all with such an open palm and say, God, I don't know what 2025 has in store for me, but this year I'm going to let you do your thing. This year I'm going to let you make the plans. I'm going to let that aspect go. I'm a planner. I know it's hard to do. Let that aspect go and just like strap in, buckle up, enjoy the ride. You ever get in a car with someone and you're like, I know that they're a good driver, so I can play on my phone. I can just sit in the passenger seat. I could play with the radio. I can just hang out. All right, guys, that's kind of it for today's episode. Lots of analogies, lots of good stuff in today's episode. Like I said, it kind of felt like a term paper. I was writing the outline and I was like, citation, John 15, 1 Thessalonians 5, 6. Like, I was like, citation, boom, 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 versus term paper, bullet points. I hope that you guys enjoyed it. I hope that you feel encouraged to find faith in the waiting season, courage to surrender as you go into the new year, knowing that, yeah, your dreams are within reach, but ultimately it's up to God, and His plan is way better than the plan that you think you want for your life. Because God's waiting room is actually His weight room. Get in there and train hard, and I promise you will not be disappointed with the outcomes. Thank you guys so much for listening to today's episode. I really hope that you enjoyed it. If you did, please be sure to give it a rating and a review. That just helps more people find and listen to the show. Keep in mind that next week we will not have a new episode. We are taking just a 1-week break, and then we're going to be back January 9th with a huge announcement that I'm so excited to share with you. I love you guys so much. I hope that you have a beautiful rest of your day, a great start to the new year, and I'll talk to you very, very soon.